Hey y'all, welcome to the Coyote Trapping School podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris Pope. Today I thought I'd kind of give an overview. I made the long trip halfway across country this past weekend to the National Trappers Association convention, the NTA convention in Springfield, Missouri. That's my first national convention that I've been to, and it was awesome. That's the best way that I can put it. It was awesome. So I figured I'd kind of give you a recap, kind of my takeaways from that. And maybe some things that you can expect coming down the pipe. But like I said, the National Trappers Association, it's getting convention season to begin with. A lot of states, from now through the fall, states will start having their conventions, and so be on the lookout in your state. It's a great the conventions in general. There's typically people doing demos, trapline demos, trapping demos. Some conventions, our convention here in Georgia actually has a live trap line that they run first thing in the morning, so that's really neat. And it's a great place to see hands-on stuff work. You got trapping supply dealers there. You can peruse all their items versus flipping through them in a catalog. Buy stuff and not have to worry about shipping and things like that. Usually got some show specials going on. So it's definitely something if you're in the trapping world and you've never been to one, I would really encourage you to try to find one and go to it, one nearby you, because it's really it's worthwhile going, especially from a beginner's perspective, to kind of see for yourself, see firsthand the different kinds of equipment, smell all the different baits and lures, and just talk to some trappers and see some of the demos and how trappers do things. And the National Trappers Association, the NTA, they always have one big convention, their main convention, and then their regional convention. So there's usually a southeastern regional, I think there's a northeastern regional, and a western regional or something. I mean, there's a couple of sub conventions. So I've been to a couple of the NTA regional conventions that were kind of close here in the southeast, and those are always good. Your state conventions are typically the smallest, and then when you get up to the regional, you'll have a few more vendors and more people show up, and then the national, it was impressive because there was just more people than I'd ever seen. More, just about any of the major supply dealers you could think of were there, and the big names in trapping. To me, that's one thing that makes trapping, it kind of makes our industry unique, is that the pros, the professional trappers, that we kind of, as regular trappers, we kind of put on a pedestal. That's your time. These conventions are your time that you can go and shake their hand, meet them face to face, ask them questions, look at their products, and I don't think there's a lot of there's not many other industries where you can go and shake hands and take 10 minutes, 15 minutes and talk with, one of the leaders in the industry about what's, how they do something, or, their take on a particular, situation that you've been encountering or something like that. To me, that's a really neat thing, and that's something as a new trapper, it's neat to go in, go to one of these conventions and see the folks that we tend to kind of idolize, so to speak, as the sure enough professional guys, professional trappers. So I would say that's a huge driver, or a huge reason to put an effort into going to some of these conventions, just to talk and to just relate with other trappers in general, but also the chance to meet some of the folks that are at the top of the industry, the top performers, and see what they got, see what they're offering. Most of them are lined up for demos, so you can see actually how they do stuff. So that's a really neat opportunity. I jumped right past it, but one of the things the convention, the NTA convention, was basically kind of 3 sections, all full of trapping supplies and trapping, all kind of things related to trapping. There was a bunch of fur items, stuff made out of fur. There was tanned furs, some different kind of rustic kind of decor and stuff. There was a couple of women booths, some kind of outdoor gear jewelry and things. It was pretty neat to see. So and a lot of people there was a lot of people there. One thing that I was going just a minute ago is, if you've never been to a convention, when you go to one, from there on out you'll always recognize the smell. I don't know what it is. It's no matter what lure makers, how many there it is, for some reason, I guess it's when all the different glands and stuff start to mold together, there's a distinct smell. And when you crack that door open, or the guy in front of you cracks that door open to go in, and you smell it, you know this is a trapper's gathering. And that's, to me, that's just something that it just makes me smile every time. You know, I know when I smell that smell, I know it's going to be a good day. So that's just something that's kind of neat. I guess for a lot of other industries, it'd be a sweaty locker room or something like that. You know, I don't know that the smell would be that appealing, but that's just one of the intricacies of the trapping world, so to speak, I guess you could say. Talking about the, you know, kind of the pros and the demos. You know, there's always question and answer sessions around the demos and after the demo, so that's a really neat opportunity, a really good opportunity to like I say, kind of pick the brain of some of the top performing guys in the industry, what they're doing, why they're doing things. So that's a big driver, and that's one of the things that I didn't with this trip. I kind of, being my first attempt or my first go round, and with the podcast and all, I was kind of trying to focus more on making contacts and making connections with folks, and so I didn't get to see as many demos as I would have liked, but it was a good trip, and I made some good contacts, and hopefully y'all will be seeing more of that in the future here. But a couple of the folks that I talked to, just to give you some a little insight tidbits. I talked to Andy Weiser, who is a big Western trapper. He traps out of Montana. I actually talked with him for a little while about mountain lion trapping, because I'm going to Texas. If everything goes right, hopefully I'll be in Texas in November sometime trapping, and the plan is, hopefully, when we run across lion sign, to set for lions. So Andy actually set me up. He recommended a couple of his different lures here to me, for specifically for lions, kind of how he would pair them. Super Cat, which is very skunky. I'm not going to crack that one open. It's MLC modified. Use a dirt hole and flat sets. Good for canines and cats. Then Rocky Mountain rub lure specifically for cats and lions. Creates a rubbing response. And then Old Reliable mild call lure for cats, canines. And one of the things, I was talking with him a little bit about sets and all, and I hope to interview him and talk with him a little bit more specifically about lion trapping. But you know, he said the way he would approach it is just like Western cat trapping, that, you know, you find the washes, find the areas where the cats are going through, and try to nick it down as much as possible. You know, find a canyon wall, or find some tight junipers or mesquite in Texas. I don't know what's going to be in West Texas, but, you know, somewhere where they're coming through and you've got sign, and you can really narrow them down and put your trap, maybe put a couple traps, and put blocking sticks, and then put, you know, one of these lures on each side. And cats in general, you can fence them, you can put stepping sticks, you can leave your pans exposed. I mean, there's a lot you can do to kind of try to target cats, and so I'm pretty excited about kind of using those methods of targeting cats in general, versus, you know, I guess more specifically targeting for cats, versus, you know, here in the East, of just kind of putting in your dirt holes and knowing that you got as good of a chance of catching a cat as a coyote, you know. So that's pretty exciting. So then, as we were talking lions, Andy introduced me to Tim Caven, who is the owner of Minnesota Trapline Products, and I talked with Tim for a little while about, you know, traps specifically for lions. And of course, you know, their top recommendation, if you're specifically targeting lions, was a fully modified MB750, and that's a tricked out trap, and that is a Cadillac. You know, a nice big surface area, but as Tim and I were talking, the bolt, I'm not going out there strictly targeting lions. I'm going to be running a coyote and cat line, and if we run across, and I say if, hopefully when we run across lion sign, I intend to set specifically for lions, but I'm not going out there just to set lion sets. And so in that respect, he said that the number 3 Bridger would be a good, kind of all around trap. That 750 will catch bobcats, and they'll catch coyotes, but it's big for them. And so, and ahead of myself, but that's where the way I'm going to go. I'm going to take my MB 550s and run those on my typical line. Probably what I'm going to do is I've got some of my number 5 Bridgers that are modified anyway, and so I'll make sure I'm gonna laminate all of those. And I hadn't bought any new number 5 Bridgers in a while. They've been in my stable for a while. I need to replace at least the dog, if not the pan too, and probably try to go with expanded pans on them. And that'll be my trap. That if we're setting specific for lion, then that's what I'll go with there. So. But that was just, I've ordered a ton of things from Minnesota Trapline Products and never met Tim Caven before. So there again, it's a neat opportunity to be able to meet and talk with somebody, about that stuff specifically. As a side note, if you're not saving your beaver casters and you're catching any beavers, you have lost your mind. So I got a dozen brand new MB 550 traps here. And it didn't cost me anything. Well, I shouldn't say that. It cost me 3 pounds of beaver caster. So that was a smooth, even trade. I've talked about it before, and I've seen prices anywhere from $60 to $90 a pound on caster, dried caster. And so I had, and that was over the last 2 seasons. I think I saved all my caster. I know I saved all my caster from last season, but I don't think I sold any of it or traded any of it or anything like that. Typically, that's what I like to do with my caster is, kind of barter with it when I go instead of getting paid for it. Just swap out some trapping supplies and that all works out. So, but like I said, if you're trapping beavers and you need to be saving your casters, I've got a video on how to cut the casters out. Hang them over a little rope or something, in your fur shed. Flip them over once to make sure all the parts of it get dried. Once it's good and dried, I'll throw them in the freezer just so I don't have to worry about bugs or anything like that. And then when they're ready to go, when I'm going to a convention or something, and they're ready to go, I weigh them out ahead of time. And man, you're crazy not to. That's one of the things that Tim said. He said, it wasn't that long ago, and he was turning away caster at $10 a pound just because he didn't have any more room for it, and now he's paying at the convention $70 a pound. So that's wild, and you never know. The caster market is just like the fur market. You never know what it's going to do. But I would say, in talking with Tim, one of the things he said is that in Minnesota, and I assume it's pretty consistent across the north, that they weren't as effective in their spring beaver season, and that's when a lot of the caster and the beavers are caught in the north is in the spring beaver season, because their apparently ice out was later than normal, and but the temperatures had warmed up enough that when spring beaver season came in, the ice was still there, but it wasn't solid enough that you could under ice trap, because the ice wouldn't support you or may not support you. And so, but the ice didn't go out until the end of the season. So me reading between the lines and him talking about that, I would say that there is these high caster prices are likely to stay up at least for another year. So it probably is worth targeting beaver just for the caster, if nothing else. So beaver hides, the fur market has kind of increased a little bit, improved a little bit, but between the fur and the casters, if it's got nice plump casters, it's worth, beavers, in my opinion, are probably worth messing with. That was kind of a side note, and I thought of something when I was telling you all that, and don't remember what it was now. But anyway, so one thing I'm thinking about with these is, I got to go back and check on it and see exactly what it said, but in O'Gorman's Hoofbeats of a Wolfer, he talked about not treating traps at all, just taking them right out of the box and going and setting them. So that's what I'm thinking about, just to, maybe I'll just do a half a dozen, I don't know, but just to try it, just to see, just taking these traps, not dyeing them, not waxing them, not washing them, just taking them and setting them and seeing what happens. I don't know. I'll still think on that. Another thing that I was wanting to get some of the No BS K9, No BS Lures K9 Extreme Juniors. They didn't have any of those in stock, but they're supposed to be at the Georgia convention, and so I plan to get a dozen if they bring them, if everything lines up right. I hope to get a dozen there, and so I think those are going to be a jam up trap to use right out of the box. I'm excited about getting my hands on some of those. So I think that's probably about the closest competition to the 550 that I've seen so far. A couple of other guys that I talked with Jeff Haggerty, who makes Hags brackets, and he's a real nice guy, real neat guy. I like talking with him and just looking at his brackets and all, and it's really those brackets are built for the water trapper, especially the muskrat trappers. And man, in the South we just don't have muskrats. We don't have the water trapping like that. So we don't have the opportunity really to use that stuff. But it's really just looking at how the brackets were designed, and it's neat. It was neat just seeing all the thought and the intricacies went into that, and talking to him about that. And then the one thing that we could use is he's just come out with a drowning lock. So, and it's really neat. It's kind of a multi-purpose. So it'll go on, I think it'll go on 1/2 inch rebar, 3/8 inch rebar, number 2 or number 1 machine chain, and then of course 3/32 and 1/8 inch cable, and then trapper's wire. So it's a lock that'll go on all of that stuff. So that's a really neat thing, and it's one thing that I've used, talking about beavers and drowning, I've used drowning cable, of course, 1/8 inch cable, and then I've used the drowning rods, and I've used long chain, but I've never used chain specifically for drowning. And so that's a neat little aspect that I've been thinking about, because you don't have to worry about the kinking like you do with the cable, but you still got to have a weight to anchor it. And that's the one thing that I like about the drowning rods is they're awkward for sure, 10-foot rod, but you don't have to worry about the weights, so and as awkward as it seems, it's not as awkward maneuvering around with them. I mean, I don't trap far from the truck to begin with, so it's not that big of a deal for me. But even if I take them a little ways through the woods, it's not that awkward, hauling a super light 10-foot pole as it is hauling a cinder block through the woods, So, but the one thing that he talked about that he uses them a lot for is for coyotes in farm country. Getting a coyote out of a field and off of he said he sets a lot of blind sets, and using a slide chain basically is what it is to get the coyote away from his blind set out of the field. And so that's a real neat idea that I've never given a lot of consideration to. I've tinkered around a little bit with cubbies on bobcats, and I've been using I've used drags a few times. I haven't caught anything in the cubbies. I haven't tinkered around with them that much, but use drags for them to be able to get away and not destroy the cubby. But that would be another option, especially where drags aren't practical. So that was a neat, like I say, just there's a lot of neat stuff there. One fella, and I gotta look him up. I can't remember the name of his traps, but he has come up with a trap design that the pan is actually, the best I can call it is center fired. So the trap is fired, the pan actually goes straight down. It pivots, and there's two, I guess the best way I could describe them is dogs maybe that go out to the sides, and that's actually what locks the jaws down. So it locks both jaws down, kind of similar to, if you're familiar with like an MB750 or a 650, how it locks both jaws down. And then, but like I said, the trap is fired directly from the center, the the pivot point is directly under the pan and how it works. So that was pretty neat. He was selling mainly his wolf traps. He's got a couple of Coyote models, but doesn't have those in production yet. But that's just, again, one of the neat things that you see. There's always, as trappers, we're always thinking about, there's always something going through the minds, tinkering or how you can improve something. And so it's neat to see what folks come up with. I talked with Clint Lockler a little bit, and I actually bought his book, his Eastern Wolfer book. This is one I hope to do. I plan on doing another, kind of a review on. And I'm thinking, I know Clint, he took instruction from O'Gorman, and I think a lot of what he does it has been shaped by O'Gorman. So I'm excited to read his book. But he's probably one of the more prominent, prolific Eastern and especially kind of southeastern coyote trappers, or trappers in general. Clint's been in the industry a long time, and has got the numbers nationwide, but especially in the South, that and he's probably been one of the more forward-thinking trappers so far as internet content with his trapping radio. He was podcasting before most businesses were podcasting, much less trapping shows podcasting. His Wolfer Nation YouTube channel and Wolfer Nation community and all. So I if Clint says something, I listen, because he's been around and he knows his stuff. He knows what he's doing, and so I'm really excited to dig into that book. Also talked with Justin Jets and Mr. Charlie Masek at Hoosier Trapper Supply. Those guys were there, and we actually sat down and did kind of a dual interview, because they have the trapping podcast now, the Trap House podcast, and so we kind of at the same time interviewed each other, and that was really neat. Just talking to these folks that somebody that thinks as much about trapping as you do. That's because that's not people that you run across in your daily life, So I really appreciated that, and I came home with some Top Dog Predator bait. That's what both of them. That's their kind of flagship. Hoosier Trapper Supply. They got a Leatherwood Creek trapping scents, and that's Mr. Charlie's kind of his flagship bait there. And I told him I couldn't leave there without trying some of that. So got a couple of their other top scents. One things I like. I didn't look at all their stuff, but one of the things I like, and it's little kind of nitpicky things almost, but these plastic lure jar lids. I like the plastic jar lids because you don't have to worry about rust and that thing needing pliers to get it off. So I don't know. It's funny, the little things that you pick up on after you've been doing things a while, and that's another thing. Was so many baits and lures. A man could go broke up there just wanting to try a little bit of everybody's bait and lure. So I don't want to get too crazy into that. Like I said, anybody that produces. For the most part, baits and lures and trapping supplies. Mark June, Rusty Johnson were there. Mark Zager, the guys from F&T, Southern Snares, who's a Georgia boy, he was there. If you get a chance, it's worth the trip. Even if it's a long drive, it's worth the trip to go to the NTA convention. I think it's going to be held in Kalamazoo, Michigan next year. And actually, I would like to go to one of the northern shows. And talking with Mr. Charlie and Justin, Mr. Charlie said that the show last year was in Escanaba, Michigan, and he talked about so I guess one thing that I didn't mention is not only do you have the inside vendors, but they're also what they call tailgaters on the outside, and it's some of those are trapping supply dealers like the Oklahoma guys. I can't think of their name right now, but the Oklahoma guy, Okie Trap Supply, Okie Trap and Cable or something like that. Those guys were there. They were set up outside, and then a ton of guys selling used traps and things like that. I mean, that's definitely a place to go if you need, or if you're in the market for some used traps. So, but Mr. Charlie said that's one thing that he noticed is how many more tailgaters there were at that Michigan show than there were at the Missouri show, and I think as somebody from the South, trapping has never been that big in the South, just because of the fur market. We don't have the qualities, and we don't have the market swings that can make it more worthwhile to trap. You talk to some of the folks that are up north, and they talk about how when coon prices go up, you got trappers coming out of the woodwork because they know they can make a quick buck, or they're counting on making a quick buck. They know how to long line coons, and so they're out there beating the pavement with everybody else, and that doesn't happen in the South. Regardless of what prices are, I've never got any competition around here. So I would like to see one of those northern shows, even like Pennsylvania, New York, one of those places, just from the sounds of it, just the number of trappers that are in in that northeast, kind of the heart of the fur belt, the fur industry, if you will. I think that would be worth going to as well. One thing I talked about was being able to get your trapping supplies at a save on shipping. A big thing from the nuisance trapping perspective, I talked with there were several groups there, several guys selling cage traps. I talked for a while with Jim Comstock. He runs Comstock, I think it's Comstock Cage Traps or something like that, but he's put a lot of time and effort into thinking about cage traps, and he has got some Cadillac cage traps, no doubt. And that's one thing from a nuisance perspective. As I've dipped my toe a little bit in that, you can go to Tractor Supply and get 2 cage traps for $30 or $25 or something like that, but the first armadillo you catch in one, and he's probably going to destroy it. So especially doing it and kind of getting paid, or doing it more for a living, where you're relying on it, investing in quality, just like not going with the cheap traps, but paying a little bit more and getting quality traps, that definitely is a consideration. And so that this can be a great way to go and for sure save on some costs from something that's even bigger and bulkier than shipping a dozen traps, is shipping more than one big cage trap. So but if you're in the nuisance business or in any way, I'd encourage you to check out Comstock. Let me look it up right quick and see. Stock. Come on, Google. Comstock Cage Traps. ComstockCustomCage.com. Check out his traps. That's what he does. This trigger system is he's got a patented trigger system that's a wire trigger system that's actually it's not so much designed to be used with bait as it is just a pass through. And he showed me I was hard pressed to not get it, but he showed me one of his beaver traps, and it's the spring loaded doors. I mean, it's a Cadillac trap. And he said that's anymore now. He's the last several years he's strictly trapped with those cage traps for beavers. Caught like over 1,000 beavers in cages alone, which is pretty impressive, and it's kind of neat, especially since I've been kind of tinkering with cage traps on my own anyway. So anyway, that's Comstock Cage Traps. So to wrap up, Tom Miranda was at the convention, so he was at last year's convention too, and I don't know how many people nowadays know who Tom Miranda is, but back in the 70s and 80s, before and during the fur boom, Tom Miranda was a professional trapper. I mean, he was right up there with all the professional trappers. He was making lures. He was actually the first one to come out with instructional tapes, VHSs. At that time, he came out with a couple himself, and then through Fur Fishing Game, and so kind of, I guess you could kind of say on the revolutionary side from the trapping perspective of trying to educate trappers. And he said he caught a lot of flack from trappers themselves, from kind of the old guard of trappers that weren't especially when there was a fur boom and trapping was good money. They didn't like the idea of, the old school trappers didn't like the idea of more competition. And so I appreciate from the perspective of trying to educate and get people involved in coming into trapping. But I grew up watching Tom Miranda on I think that's what it was, Advantage Adventures on ESPN. After I'd get home from school, he was on in the afternoons, and he kind of talked about in his demo there. He talked about his progress up through his career, and he also, if you listen to Clint Lockler's Trapping Radio podcast, he interviewed Tom Miranda at last year's competition or convention and talked about it too. And it's a neat, it's just a really neat story. Like I say, he was one of the top trappers. He was diehard in the trapping industry, making his living off the trapping industry. He bought his first, he bought rural property and built a cabin with trapping money. He bought vehicles with trapping money. He bought his first airplane with trapping money and checked traps out of an airplane. I mean, he was sure enough doing it. But he talked about that and how he had to decide. He came to the point of he had to decide how he could kind of reach more people and impact more people from kind of the outdoor lifestyle. And I can see him saying that makes sense with his early videos on trying to get people into trapping. And he said he had a pivotal moment of talking with Jimmy Houston, and who was a big time TV fisherman, and he was talking with Jimmy Houston about putting trapping on TV, and Jimmy didn't think that was a good idea, and so they kind of pointed toward bow hunting, and Tom said that was still his focus was he wanted to highlight and have the opportunity to showcase our lifestyle, outdoorsman and trapping lifestyle to as many people as possible. And he actually got the opportunity. I think he was the first outdoor kind of hunting show on ESPN, and so that was, and he talked about the way he incorporated it and kind of the way he got buy-in from ESPN was that it was called Outdoor Adventure Magazine, and so it wasn't strictly hunting and fishing and trapping. He did all kinds of stuff from bungee jumping to flying in a fighter jet. He rode a bull, all kinds of kind of adrenaline-packed things, skydiving, and so he would mix like a segment of bull riding or skydiving in with a segment of hunting or fishing, and that's how he kind of tried to influence the mainstream through the adventure aspect. And it was just a really neat take, and from my perspective of trying kind of in the same vein of trying to impact and promote our trapping lifestyle and what trapping really means to us, and the, I guess for lack of a better word, the injustice that we face from uneducated and, not meaning this in a negative way, but ignorant people that think Bambi is real, and they've got that stereotype of murdering bloodthirsty savages, and that's not what any trapper's about. And so and that's kind of what I've tried to showcase through the years that I've been doing this in my videos, is trying to portray trapping in a positive light. And I'm not trying to make everybody a trapper. If you're interested in trapping, I want to help you become a trapper, but I don't want everybody to be a trapper. But I hope there's some people that have watched some of my content and thought, that's not really what I expected out of a trapper. Maybe I've thought about this wrong, or maybe I've heard about this wrong, and maybe trappers aren't all bloodthirsty, cutthroat, savages. So anyway, it was neat for me, just kind of, and has been just kind of thinking through that mindset of I I can appreciate the path that he took, and I'm sure he took some flack from trappers, kind of getting out of the trapping industry, but it seems like he's kind of getting back involved, and I think he's trying to kind of bring things full circle now. So I appreciate his story, and one of his main points was, just the lifestyle that is trapping. It's all built around work, and the work ethic that trapping created for him, that really gave him the drive and the desire and the will to put in the work that was required to get where he is. And that's one of the neat things that he said was, when he went to ESPN and had the pilot and they bought in on the pilot and he was producing these shows, they thought that he had a production team, and all he did was hire a cameraman, and he was editing and he had to learn how to do all the back end video stuff to put his content out there. He didn't have a production team, but that's what everybody thought. But I can appreciate that from a trapper standpoint, because as trappers, we tend to think that we don't need other people's help, that we can figure it out, and we very much have that mindset, and I think that's a benefit to us. And I think I don't think that's exactly what Tom Miranda was getting at. Is we have to some degree an unfair advantage because we're interested and drawn to this endeavor that the core of it is work, but it's something that we're passionate about, and that almost I'm trying to think of the right word, but it almost kind of coincidentally creates a work ethic, or maybe not creates a work ethic, but encourages a work ethic that I'm going to be up early checking traps, and I'm going to be up late skinning, and that's the deal. That is this thing, but I love it. I love making that catch. I love looking at those furs when they're put up and hanging on the wall, and I love getting that check. And you think about it, for a lot of us, we don't care. We care to a degree, but a lot of us, we're not in it for the check. So that means that puts even more work on us, and I feel like I'm rambling there, but that was the point of the work ethic that trapping really requires, and how that sets trappers up to succeed in other areas. And I really appreciated that. And I was thinking about it more. I think that's one reason why the trapping brotherhood kind of is tight knit like it is, because we know the work that goes into trapping. So when you meet another trapper, you know that he's not late, to some degree. You know that he's not late. You know that he's a go-getter. You know that there's so many things. There's just, you know what it takes to be a trapper. So if somebody's willing to put all that in to truly be a trapper, not just talk about trapping, but truly be a trapper, then 9 times out of 10, that's good people, and that I like being in that community, and I like the folks that are also in the trapping community. And so I think that'll wrap it up. I hope I didn't ramble too much, but I hope I gave you kind of a little taste of what the NTA convention was like, and encouraged you that if it's anywhere near you within a day's drive, it's worthwhile going. If you've never been, and even if you have been, it's probably still worthwhile going. And lastly, I just want to say thanks to everybody that stopped me. I was pretty humbled by the amount of people that recognized me and stopped to say hey, or just say they appreciated what I'm doing. The content that I put out, and I liked what I'm doing. So I really wasn't expecting that, to be recognized out of the blue, walking down an aisle or something like that. But that was really neat, really humbling, and it kind of goes back to that, what talking about what Tom was saying, is that just the trapping brotherhood, the camaraderie that comes with knowing the work that goes in, and that if somebody's willing to put in that work, they're good folks, and that's a fact. So thanks to everybody that follows along and supports, has bought stuff from me, and continue to watch and listen to what I put out. And I really appreciate the folks that stopped me and said hey, and that meant a lot. So I intend to keep it coming. I hope to get some. I got work on getting some interviews lined up and get some good quality guests on to really help as we look towards and we move towards next trapping season, or this coming trapping season, to really blow it out and exceed our expectations and improve ourselves as trappers. So do have the episode with the Hoosier Trapper Supply guys, our Hoosier Trapper Outdoors, Justin and Mr. Charlie. That'll be coming out soon too. And if you hadn't listened to their podcast, be sure to go look up the Trap House podcast, their interviews. And I listened actually today to the first podcast. It was kind of Mr. Charlie's story, and that was really neat. I like hearing those kind of intro stories to how folks get started trapping, but even more so how folks that are in the industry, like Mr. Charlie selling fur or selling supplies, and hearing how he was buying fur and things, that intrigues me about how folks have made a living in this industry, at least in part. So I hope y'all are having a good summer. Be sure to check out with your state to see when your state convention is coming up, and we'll see you around.